Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paul's Monday afternoon interview, where I have the pleasure of introducing author Ray Laferla. So Ray is a psychologist and leading authority in the fields of leadership and personal development. He's facilitated seminars worldwide and has distinguished himself as a celebrated international keynote speaker, trainer, executive coach, and counselor. Ray has lectured at several universities, published 5 books, and has written numerous articles for professional journals. If you ask Ray what his mission is, he'll tell you in one concise sentence: it is to empower people to take charge of their lives and experience a happy, productive, and meaningful existence. This can only be achieved by controlling our emotions, very important, and applying strategies that take us to where we want to go. It is in pursuit of this quest that Ray has written a new book called Empowered, a practical guide for overcoming the challenges of everyday life. And I'm just going to quickly pull it on the screen here while I welcome Ray. Hello, Ray. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, Paul, and hi, all of you.
Right. I'm going to start right off and ask Ray, why did you write this book?
Well, for many, many years, I've run several courses that deal with personal development. I ran a course called The Psychology of Success, Strategies for Personal Growth, and so on. And I ran these all over the world for many companies. Now, this course is a generic course in that I dealt with what success is, attitudes, your personality, how to use your personality to your best ability. And then we dealt with things like self-motivation, goals, and so on. But after running these courses, people came back and they told me, it's all very well knowing those big things. We know about them. But I struggle with things like procrastination, overcoming bad habits. How do I make personal decisions that help me rather than get in my way? How do I stop self-sabotage and things like that? And those kind of things I didn't deal in my course. I did bring in some other things like how to forgive, because forgiveness is a major psychological problem when people hold on to resentments and anger and so on. But it's these other everyday things that people reminded me they needed, and they didn't have a resource to have it. I've also done a great deal of counseling, executive coaching for many years. And whilst dealing with people, I would tell them what to do, I didn't have a reference for them to go to. And then came COVID-19. I had about 6 months of work lined up with no break at all over the world. And that just stopped. My business went off a cliff from being very busy to having nothing to do. I couldn't get onto a plane. I couldn't fly anywhere. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't run seminars. I couldn't see people because of lockdown. And I thought, what am I going to do now? I thought of maybe initially updating my courses, developing some new ones, doing some programs on Zoom and so on. And it suddenly occurred to me, here's the ideal opportunity to write a book that enables people to empower themselves and to deal with everyday problems and challenges that they face in life. So if you like, this is a kind of coach in a book. It's your personal coach in a book. It's a self-help book that's a how-to book, an owner's manual.
So Ray, you obviously know that I've read several chapters in the book already, and I'm busy enjoying it. In fact, one of the ways that I'm going about it is it's got 35 chapters in it, and I'm not just trying to wade through them as quickly as possible. I'm choosing 2 chapters per evening, which it's pretty easy. I can read that in 8 to 10 minutes, and then sleeping on that so that my subconscious mind thinks about what I've just read. But one of the things that came through that was really interesting to me is in just about every chapter, emotion comes into it. And perhaps you'd like to talk to us about how our emotions can, in a sense, derail our best intentions.
Well, the key emotions that derail our intentions are fear and anxiety. Fear about the things that may happen and anxiety, but also the regrets of the past and what has happened in the past. Now, the key philosophical principle that runs throughout the book is this. There are things you can do something about, and there are things you can do nothing about. What you can control are your emotions, your feelings, how you think, and so on. What you cannot control is what happens to you, what other people have done, what other people do, your past, what's going to occur in the future. So if you can now focus your energies on, I'm not going to control other people. I'm not going to worry about what other people said. I'm not going to worry about what other people did. I'm not going to concern myself about the future. I'm going to concern myself with what I can do today, now, to deal with my problems and the issues that I have. And that includes thinking correctly about them. Now, if we look at how emotions arise, emotions don't just happen. They come out of our thinking. So something happens to me, a guy cuts in front of me with his car, and I think, bugger, how can he do that? Who the hell does he think he is? Blah, 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 blah. That thinking has generated my feeling, not the guy cutting me off with his car.
Correct. Yeah.
I can equally say when he cuts me off with his car, I wonder why he's in such a hurry. You know, what's the problem? If I think that, I won't have the feelings that I have. And so often our feelings are created by interpreting things negatively and interpreting things badly.
Ray, can I ask you just at this point, I often find that our reactions and our emotions are led to a large extent by our pre-programming. In other words, learning a particular behavior from someone. So I have my own example of that where my then girlfriend many years ago sat me down after I'd driven us back from the shop and said to me, you know, what happens to you when you get on the road? Why do you become a pig? And I was kind of quite taken back because she'd never had an unkind word to say towards me. So I sat and thought about it, and I remembered the example I'd had from my father that he used to get angry behind the wheel of the car. So all I was doing was, in a sense, imitating his behavior. And perhaps you can talk to us a little bit about how sometimes our pre-programming has a lot to do with the automatic route to how we respond to something emotionally.
Yes, our pre-programming does happen, but it only affects our behavior because we don't look at it, we don't challenge it, we don't ask ourselves, why do I need to behave that way? So your dad behaved that way, you saw your dad behave that way, you thought that was the appropriate behavior, and you continued to do what he did. Correct. Without thinking about it. But you could equally say, wait a minute, I'm going to choose not to get upset when a guy cuts off. I don't know what his issues are. I don't know why he's riding the way he is. I don't know what his problem is, but why must I let it upset me? Now, emotions don't just happen. When you think about something and you think about it in a certain way, the endocrine system releases neuropeptides in the body. These are actually protein ligands. They're physical molecules. These molecules don't go down the body and they lock onto receptor sites. The receptor site, for example, for anger is the liver. That's why we talk about being livid. So you've got these molecules that come around, they lock onto the liver, a chemical reaction takes place. That's a form of energy. The energy is the emotion. Emotion stands for energy in motion. Now, first of all, you have to release the protein, the neuropeptide that causes the key to go into the lock to create the emotion. Now, if something happens, you go into your car, your dad used to get upset, and you do the same thing. You might say, why should I get upset? Because dad used to get upset.
But we're talking here about a conscious decision, aren't we? At some stage,
we're talking about a conscious decision, but what you need to do is interrupt that ordinary, immediate, spontaneous response.
Yeah.
There's if you can create a slight gap between the initiating action and your response, in that gap, you can choose not to get upset.
Yes. Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, in other words, what you are saying is that we can override pre-existing pathways of reaction.
We can create new habits.
Yes.
are repeatedly behaving in different ways until that habit becomes entrained in a human being.
Okay, so I have another question for you. I was reading the chapter Keeping Hope Alive in the book, and it was so beautiful the way you put it right at the end of that chapter, is that every human being needs something to do, someone to love,
And
and
something
to look forward to. Talk to us a bit about that.
Well, you'll find that inevitably people who get depressed are people who have nothing to look forward to in life. People that don't feel loved and who don't love. And so their whole lives consist of, I don't know why I'm living. I don't know what to do about my life. I'm in pain. Nobody cares about me. And they go into a state of depression. So if you can find something to do, someone to love, and something to hope for, then, and you move along that line, you can very quickly move away from depression. I'll give an example with my mom. When my dad died, they'd been married many, many years, 30, 40 years, I think. And my mom went into depression when he died because we were all out of the house now and she was on her own. She never worked since we were born. And she just remained in that house thinking of my dad the whole time. After about 6 months, I said to her, Mom, you've got to go and work. I don't want to work. So I went to a friend who was a very good friend of hers, by the way, who had a jewelry shop. And I said, Marie, I need you to help Mom. I would like to pay you to pay Mom to work for you. Tell my mom you need her, because she used to sometimes work in the shop. Mom didn't want to, but Marie assured her that she needed her. It was near Christmas anyway. And my mom went and worked in the shop. But it wasn't long before she was still sad, but the depression left her. Because once you've got something to do, once you've got something to hope for, something to look forward to go to work in the morning, to do something, a goal, something to do, and someone to love. She felt Marie's love because Marie really did care about her. That depression lifted. Of course, the sadness remained because it was a serious event. Grief is a terrible thing. It goes on for a while, which is normal. But you'll find people who experience depression lack those three. And by the way, that comes from Freud.
Yeah. So I think that as one gets older, it's more likely that one will have experienced some kind of loss before. But in a sense, we're not only talking about loss of another person, we're talking about loss of something else, like loss of your job, which has happened to a lot of people during this time of COVID-19. People have lost their jobs, they've lost their livelihoods. Some people have even lost their homes. In fact, they reckon that there's been more mental illness and anxiety around in the last year than probably since the Second World War. So what advice would you give to people to be able to handle this anxiety about the present and the future and perhaps the position that they've got themselves into because of the last year?
I would say, first of all, accept what you can't change. If you've financially ruined because of COVID, if you've lost people you love because they've died because of COVID, if you've lost your job and you don't know how you're going to make ends meet and cope with things, accept what you can't change. Then sit back and think, what can I do? What skills do I have? What interests do I have? What hobbies do I have? And if you're not going to do anything for yourself, then do it for others. Join charity groups that help others. And if you don't want to do that, then go online and learn a course. Take a course that you've been wanting to take, or learn to play the piano, or indulge your hobby and play golf. But don't sit back pondering the misery of your circumstances. And while you're doing that, think of what you can do in the future, what skills you have, how you're going to go about sorting things out. Don't worry about what has happened. You can't change what has happened, but take action about what you can do. And look at your strengths, look at your weaknesses, look at your personality, and also communicate your thoughts with people you love and people who understand. I don't mean the whole world. Don't go into a withdrawal where you sit alone at home the whole time, just having a pity party all by yourself. You're only going to feel depressed and it's only going to get worse. Go out and do something. Get busy. And harness your resources. See if there's something you've always wanted to do that you haven't been able to do.
Isn't it remarkable, Ray, how sometimes when we just put ourselves in the service of other people and see who we can help, that in focusing on other people's needs, it automatically lifts our depression and anxiety and gives us more of a purpose?
That is so true. Again, something to do, something to hope for. And if you're not going to love somebody, someone to help.
So Ray, when you wrote this book, who did you have in mind? Who did you write it for?
Initially, I wrote it basically for anybody who wanted to know how to control their lives and how to take charge of their feelings and do something with it. That was my first thought. Then, of course, as I wrote it, and as I went into more and more and more chapters, I realized, hey, this could help a lot of people, not only individuals. For example, when I was counseling, I wish I had a book that I could refer to, that I could say to my clients, you know, here it is, here's a chapter on this, or I'll even photostat that chapter and hand it to them. It gives them a written record of what to do, because the one thing that I've done in this book, I haven't dealt with theory. If we're talking about how to make good decisions, I haven't spoken about the value of making good decisions alone. I've told people how to make good decisions. If we talk about overcoming bad habits, I've given them a strategy for overcoming bad habits, things that you can actually do. If we're talking about the healing power of forgiveness, I'm not talking about only about the importance of forgiveness for freeing you and from untying the bonds that you have with somebody that has done you wrong. I'm talking about a practical strategy to release it. And so this book is different in that as well. Every single chapter, and the chapters between 5 and 8 pages usually, that's all. I first of all clarify what the issue is, and then I provide actual strategies that people can do to deal with a particular issue that they're facing. And I wish I had that. Now, counselors could have that. Ministers could have that to help their parishioners. Teachers could have that, and so on. Before COVID, and I'll get back into it again when this picks up, I did courses on mentoring. This book is going to be a standard handout for all mentors and coaches with the people they mentor on their jobs, because it gives you practical information on what to do about certain things that will happen to you, not might happen, will happen to you. And most people don't know these things. When you read them, you might think, oh, that's common sense. But before you read them, you realize that, hey, I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah. So Ray, it almost strikes one that it might have been written for people that are kind of mentally in a bit of trouble or struggling or depressed and what have you. And when you suggested that I pick up the book and start reading it, I don't regard myself as being depressed or in trouble or struggling too much, but I just found every chapter so insightful, and it was almost as if I picked up a few new things from each chapter. There was stuff that I knew already, but it kind of made me focus on areas that are really important. And the strategy that I've used is not to go and polish off the book as quickly as possible, because I tend to read a couple of books at the same time. I'm busy with 3 or 4 at the moment, but just to read a few chapters each day, maybe 1 or 2 at the most, and let that really sink in. What do you think of that philosophy? And
I think that's fine. But
yeah,
I think that's a good way of doing it. There isn't one way. You can do it that you can read from beginning to end, get a good idea of the book and what's in it. So when things happen to you later on, you know where to come back to.
Yeah.
You can read it one at a time and reflect and meditate on it. That's fine. You know, it's not just a chapter about overcoming problems. I mean, I talk about, for example, finding your passion.
Yeah.
Living one day at a time. Displaying courage.
Yeah.
I spoke about this the other day to a guy who's an American. He said, my golly, I wish our politicians would read that, especially the Republican Party.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the key to living is giving. So I'm not just talking about overcoming problems. I'm talking about actual philosophies for living life meaningfully.
So in other words, creating a sense of your own values and a way to live your life, really.
Absolutely.
Okay, so are there some underlying principles that you haven't mentioned already that are common to overcoming most problems and challenges?
Yeah, the one that is common is, I said, deal with what you can deal with
Yeah.
what you can control.
Yeah.
Don't deal with what you can't control. Then what you need to do is you've got to identify what the issue is. May not be a problem, may be a challenge, but what is the issue? Once you identify the issue, you've got to formulate strategies. What can I do about them? And who could I go to get me help, to enable me to do what I need to do? And then you've got to take action, you've got to follow through. And by the way, that's a recipe for success in any field.
Yeah.
Know what you want, formulate strategies for getting what you want, take action, follow through.
That makes a whole lot of sense to me. But now it seems that if we isolate ourselves and we're in a slightly depressed state, all that's going to happen is that isolation and depression is just going to make us worse. So very often we need people to bounce ideas off, to give us a different way of looking at things, to maybe give us new ideas. I'd like you to speak to that, but I'd like you to speak to something else as well. When things go wrong for us, we often tend to blame other people. We want to, it wasn't us, it was always somebody else that did it. And how can we, as human beings, overcome that urge to always want to blame someone else for what went wrong to us?
Yeah, that's one of the chapters, overcoming the blame game. The reason we blame is because we don't want to take responsibility. Because taking responsibility means I'm at fault and I need to do something about this. Much easier to say, you're to blame, I'm okay, and I don't need to do anything about it at all.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a self-protective mechanism. It's survival is the first law of life. Now, it's easy to survive if you just run away from a problem and you don't have to face it, because you're not going to feel the pain of fighting with that particular issue. But you don't grow through it when you do that. So blaming people is a way of cutting yourself off from taking any responsibility and doing anything about the dilemma that you're in. And it's a very negative situation. So first thing to do is, this has happened, why did it happen? What can I learn from what has happened? And what can I do about it?
Right. And of course, one of the things we can do about it is sometimes just go and ask for help.
Absolutely. And not just help from people, going to the internet. The internet is an amazing source of information.
Yeah.
If you, for example, lack assertion, just type in, how can I be more assertive?
Yeah.
Be amazed what you get. Now, you may get a lot of rubbish and you may get some outstanding stuff. You just have to sort out the good from the bad.
Sure.
But the internet is an amazing resource which people don't use adequately.
So Angelique has put in the chat box, she says, thanks, Ray. This is a wonderful underscoring of what I deeply believe. As a recent widow, I've discovered without doubt that you have to keep productive and stay inspired. The emotional waves can't be ignored and do need release, but they must be managed to ensure that they don't overwhelm one.
Ignoring things does not help at all. It's burying them, but it's not burying them dead. It's burying them alive. When you bury them alive in your subconscious mind, they're going to pop out in all sorts of ways later on. Yeah. Maybe in health issues, maybe in psychological issues, maybe in behavioral issues, but you can't bury things alive without them coming out somewhere. Yeah. So you have to embrace it. It may be hurtful, it may be painful. You have to deal with it and then grow through it.
Right. And then Masejo says, thank you for the talk, Ray and Paul. How does one reinvent themselves during this time in becoming a better person rather than feeling kind of down all the time? So in other words, how do you use this time to reshape yourself for positive outcomes?
Just having the knowledge and then doing what you need to do. And that's the difficult thing, doing what you need to do. Once you've got the knowledge, a lot of people can be given the knowledge, but it's the courage to actually take that knowledge and say, right, I'm going to do something with it and to follow it through.
Okay, so I think that you mentioned that it had to do with the fact that it's not really a theoretical book, it's a practical book. So the question is, how does the book differ from similar type of empowerment books that may be around?
Well, first of all, most other books deal with one subject in depth.
Yeah.
So you may have a book that deals with depression. You may have a book that deals with how to make decisions. You may have a book that deals with how to find your purpose in life. But the whole book deals with that.
Hmm.
This deals with that, but in a short, succinct essay. So it tells you what the thing is, what to do, in a very concise manner. So it's a kind of abbreviated, powerful injection of information that you need to have without going through all the side issues that you get to when you read a book on one subject. So you've got 35 different subjects.
Yes. Now, quite interesting, when you originally wrote the book, there were in fact 50 chapters, and you made the decision to only put 35 into this publication because there is actually a sequel coming. Do you want to just give us a little hint about that?
Indeed, the sequel has already been written. I've called it Enabled, and it's got another 35 chapters. And the reason I haven't put it out yet is because we're still marketing this one. And let's get finished with this. Let's get this on the road, and then let's publish the other. The other is not a sequel. It's completely different chapters.
Yes.
So I've taken 15 out of the original book, which I called Empowered Living. This was the original book. This is the manuscript of the original book. And I've used that as the first 15 chapters of the next book and added another 20 chapters to that. And that will be published in due course in the next 6 months to a year.
Right. Well, from my point of view, I know that once I'm finished with a book, if I were to pick it up again in 18 months' time, I would probably get as much value, if not more, than I just got from the first read. So that's certainly the way that I'm going to approach it. And it's not the kind of book that I'm going to stick away in the bookshelf and just leave there. It's going to be pretty much close by. I would just like to thank Ray very much for coming on. I'm reading this book in little bite-sized chunks because I'm getting so much out of each and every chapter. In fact, I'm looking forward to the evenings where I sit down and read my chapter. So Ray, thank you, and congratulations on the book. And I wish you lots of sales, and I can't wait to see the new one, Enabled, coming out. And I'll surely be getting myself a copy of that. And just for our people that have joined us on the interview, go and have a look and see if you recognize the person that wrote the foreword. So Ray, thank you so much.
Somebody called Paul Dutoy.
Or Dutois, as they say in French.
I beg your pardon, Dutois.